Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to do something a little different, a little interesting. Still going to talk about a movie, but we're going to talk about a different kind of movie. We're going to talk about Star Wars Neon Noir, which is a fan edit of the Prequel Trilogy and distills that like 9 hours of movie down to about an hour and 40 minutes. And it takes inspiration from kind of cyberpunk and neon noir stuff, as the title would imply, heavily focused on movies like Drive, a Nicholas Winding Refn's movie, and Tron Legacy. It uses a completely different soundtrack, a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of that like kind of lo-fi techno beats. Uses songs directly from the two movies I just said. Use different film scores, science fiction film scores, and it kind of just cuts out all the bullshit of the prequels and just focuses on the characters of Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker and kind of the plight. You get to watch very clearly Anakin's fall in an hour and 40-minute presentation, cutting out everything else and just focusing on like his life and his trauma and how that informed like his fall, basically. It's an interesting edit. You know, I've had some experience with fan edits. I don't watch a ton of them, but I've seen a few over the years. Most recently, I watched the Batman v Superman. It's like no Justice League cut, where they just cut out anything that could like point to further sequels and just kind of distills it down to the Superman versus Batman story, and it gets rid of everything else. And it takes the movie that's, you know, if you were to watch the ultimate cut or whatever, which is actually the real cut of the movie, the actual movie, which is which is about 3 hours long. This cuts it down to about an hour 45, give or take. And they're always interesting experiments. I've never seen one, I think, that is completely successful because, well, I mean, they don't have a ton to work with. They only have to work with what the movie and the filmmakers provided. So they have to go in, if they want to change the tone, they have to, you know, piece together things and change dialogue around and change the color timing. And some people have done really good jobs, better than others, obviously. One of the better ones I saw was they took the Hobbit trilogy, the Peter Jackson Hobbit trilogy, and took the extended cuts and made like a 3.5 hour movie. I think it's called the Tolkien cut, which is stuff that's, so it just takes out everything that's not in the books and tries to make just one story. And that, it was an interesting experiment. But like I said, they have to work with what they have. It's really hard to kind of invent something new out of that footage. But when it came to Star Wars Neon Noir, what I will say is this. I don't know if it's entirely successful, and for a lot of the same reasons I just said, but it is way more coherent and way more well-balanced than I think you might imagine. And a lot of that is because the editor really kind of understood like the structure of the story he was trying to tell, the version of the story he wanted to tell. Because it opens with the Darth Maul fight from the end of episode 1. It cuts out everything in episode 1 except for the Darth Maul fight. And that is your big opening set piece. That's before the credits even roll, right? And it sets the tone. It has a different crawl. I think the movie itself is actually called just The Fall of the Jedi. So you feel like you're kind of mise en scene. You're like in the midst of a story. It sets up that there are assassins everywhere and the Jedi are being manipulated and we don't really know who or why. And it sets them up like, you know, like we just cut into Jedi's like, you know, finishing up a mission basically. And obviously, you know, that's one of the best lightsaber fights ever. So it's cool that it's there, but it's also, it was surprising how well it works as like an opening rather than a closing. Cause it gives you some juice right away. And it helped establish kind of this tone of the tragedy of the story. Cause, you know, if you think about the prequel trilogy, it's a pretty dark story. Like if you just cut out all the bullshit, and when we're talking about the fall of Anakin and what Anakin's been through and why Anakin does what he does ultimately, it's a really dark story. And I thought that the editor did a really good job of conveying that and kind of sticking to that. It did feel more adult. And some of the stuff, actually some of the dramatic stuff, especially like in reference to Anakin, works better here by the way he puts it together, the way he structures it. Because a lot of times it gives you the sense that Anakin is like haunted, because we only see Anakin a little bit as a child in the beginning during the funeral scene of Qui-Gon, and then it kind of fades to black and then it kicks into a kind of a cool credit sequence that takes the beginning of episode 2 and makes it like a cool cruising a cool cruising thing where he's like cruising through this futuristic city, and they're playing one of the songs from Drive, and it actually worked really well. I was really surprised. But then it shows you that the Jedi are like on a mission. They're detectives. They're trying to figure out who is trying to undermine the Jedi Council. Who's trying to like fuck with politics. Like there's some grander conspiracy going on. And it just cuts straight into that. It doesn't have all of the other stuff, you know? I was really surprised how well it worked. I would say for the first like hour, it's an hour and 40-minute movie, I was pretty invested. It gets a little tedious at some point because it becomes more of like a montage, almost like a tone piece at some point. It uses very minimal dialogue, uses kind of music and transitions and the editing style, especially when it comes to Anakin, because it will flash back to things from like even from episode 1. It'll flash back to moments. The way the structure is, or even when Anakin's mother dies, it actually lands really well. Like I said, some of these emotional beats actually landed better. It's actually more impactful, because when Anakin's mother dies, you see that he feels compelled. He's got to go save her. He goes and gets her body, brings her back, buries her, and while he's kneeling at the grave and he's like really torn, it does this thing where it cuts back to like when he killed all the Tusken Raiders in that village. And it doesn't have like the extroverted scene of him like crying and freaking out, like I killed all of them, the women and the children. It cuts all that out and just kind of lets what happens speak for itself. It doesn't make the characters kind of in a silly comical way just recap what you already saw. That's the problem with a lot of the prequel stuff, is so much of it felt redundant. So much of it feels like overstated and overexplained. And this really, by cutting out that stuff, even for just the character drama, I was surprised how well it worked. And it splits its time between kind of like episode 2 and episode 3 mostly. You get like 10 minutes of episode 1 up front, like I said. And then the rest of it is split between the other two. And I would say the Clone Wars stuff, or Attack of the Clones rather, actually works better than the stuff from Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, you could see had a harder time kind of molding what he wanted to get out of it, because when you cut away a lot of the political intrigue and whatnot, and you just focus on the Jedi aspect of it, there's actually not a ton to that story or that movie. So it's an interesting experiment. Like I said, I don't know if it would work if you had never seen the prequels, because, I've seen them so many times, that I could just fill in the gaps. Like, it makes sense to me. I know what the motivations are. I know all the stuff that he cut out of the movie for this cut. So I'm aware of that. I can't help that. I would really like to show it to somebody that's never seen the prequels to see if it made sense. Because I know it's emotionally resonant, but I don't know if, like, on a plot level that you could really, really track it very well. Although it's surprising, like, how much there's always a scene that sets up like the next part of the plot, so you're able to just cut to it and just cut out all the shit that's in the middle before that. Because if you've seen Star Wars movies, they're always intercutting between plot A and plot B, and this just basically would be like, what if we just did plot A? But the thing that surprised me the most was that, or maybe not surprised me, maybe surprise is the wrong word, but George Lucas is a story guy. George Lucas can craft an interesting universe, an interesting story, an interesting hook, but he kind of lacks vision as a director. And this showed me that, with this material, or with a version of this material, if this had been authored for the intention that the editor was going for, I think you could have had a really cool movie. I think you would have had a really interesting, fun, kind of dark Star Wars movie. That was the biggest takeaway for me from watching it. I kind of wanted that, especially in this with all the new sequels that have come out and everything just feeling so all over the place, and there's no really good Star Wars stuff anymore. which is, for me is, I don't know if it's a big deal for me because I kind of checked out of Star Wars by the time they started making the sequels. I remember I was really excited for The Force Awakens. I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt, and then what happened. And still, actually, at the end of The Force Awakens, I was like, well, not my favorite thing in the world, but this is a modern filmmaking. They know they're making a trilogy, so they're building it that way. They're not trying to make like a singular, succinct movie with a beginning, middle, and end that is satisfying in that way. They're withholding stuff to build a trilogy, which is I not a huge fan of. And the most shocking thing about that stuff was that they didn't have a plan, so they're just building this thing without any direction. They have J.J. Abrams just setting up a million mysteries, and then Rian Johnson being like, "Oh, those mysteries are stupid, and I don't want to do that." So he undermines them all and does not pay them off, and even basically actively says they're dumb. And then J.J. Abrams comes back, and he's like, "No, Rian Johnson stuff was dumb. Now I'm going to cram 2 movies worth of shit into 1 movie, and it's going to be an incoherent mess." But I had kind of, like I said, I had kind of checked out before that. Like, I came to this realization. I'm like, man, I only really like 2.5 Star Wars movies. I like, of course, A New Hope. How could I not like A New Hope? A New Hope is just a perfect kind of swashbuckling sci-fi adventure movie. Deeply in debt to Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey or The Myth of a Thousand Faces. And then Empire Strikes Back takes that kind of simple, pleasing formula and understands it and broadens out and deepens the characters and deepens the mythology in a way that feels impactful. And then, Return of the Jedi is more of a mixed bag. By the time Empire Strikes Back ends, I feel like they just kind of didn't know what to do with a lot of the side characters. Because in my opinion, this is my opinion, the only stuff I like in Return of the Jedi is the Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Emperor stuff. That's all I really like. I do not care for the Ewoks. I do not care for all like the Death Star 2.0. I thought it's just so lazy. It's just so hack. And I think there was like production problems, or there was something. The reason why they chose to do that, I don't know. I guess maybe they thought it was cool because it would be like a full circle thing. But in hindsight, I just find it really just lazy and kind of boring. And the fact, Harrison Ford, famously wanted to die at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, or be found to be dead. And he is just phoning it the fuck in. It's so like distractingly phoning it in. I would say all of that part, all the Endor stuff is kind of bad, if not awful. But yeah. But going back to Star Wars Neon Noir, or Neon Noir rather, I was surprised how much I liked it. And it showed me that, like, oh, you could do something cool with this universe again. And this is kind of an older cut too. It's been out for a few years. It's on YouTube, which I cannot believe. I was like, holy shit, how is this on YouTube? Because it uses footage from those movies. I don't know how they got around that. I don't know. Because it doesn't augment the footage in a way that would like beat the algorithm. But it's on there. It's on there. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. And I would say if you're a big Star Wars fan, or you want to revisit the prequels in kind of an interesting new light, I'd say it's worth checking out. 100%. Not my favorite thing in the world. I wasn't underwhelmed by it because I didn't expect much from it. But like I said, I do think it kind of gets tedious at some point because it just doesn't have enough to work with, enough like authorship from what the available footage was. So trying to artificially create that in post, you could tell he was kind of having a hard time. He or she, I have no idea. They're having a little bit of a harder time with the Revenge of the Sith stuff, because I just not a lot there. And then, but he makes some really interesting choices in terms of like the development of Anakin's psyche, like the traumas of his life. Some of that stuff, like I said, it hit really well in Neon Noir. And if this fan edit succeeds at anything, it's that it makes Anakin almost more. You have more empathy for Anakin. He's like a better character, and also kind of improves Hayden Christensen's performance. Not because they cut it all out. I always felt bad for Hayden Christensen. I just thought he got a raw deal. Nobody looks good in those fucking movies. So for people that dogged on him forever, or even Jake Lloyd, who played the young Anakin, I always felt bad for those guys because that's George Lucas's fault. He did not a good director, and you can make the argument that maybe they were miscast because he needs to get a cast of people that have something already. Like, he's not going to be able to create a performance as a director. So it's always like, when you look back on those movies, like Ewan McGregor is like the only performance-wise like bright spot. And I think that's just because Ewan McGregor's a more interesting presence, maybe a better actor than some of his fellow castmates, I always felt bad for him, but this version actually makes like I said, it makes those emotional beats. It brings out the best parts of Hayden Christensen's performance and kind of doubles down on them, rather than just make it that weird tonal flat. I feel bad for the dude. I feel bad talking shit about him. The guy's gotten so much shit over the years, and not only added insult to injury, he gets cut out of Return of the Skywalker, whatever the fuck the last movie is called. Rise of the Skywalker. That's what it is. Rise of the Skywalker. Yeah, I think he was even filmed some stuff. Apparently in the last act when Rey is facing against the zombie emperor. All of the spirits of the past Jedi all of the Skywalkers were going to show up and give her support. So that scene where she does like the the dual lightsaber lightning strike thing at the end, holding back the Emperor and then throwing it back at him. It was supposed to be the spirits of the Jedi. And the only thing that's left in the movie, I think there's some dialogue, there's some audio from them saying like, "Don't give up, Rey." Hey, raw deal, Hayden. Raw deal, buddy. But you should check out Neon Noir, Hayden, if you haven't seen it. The guy did some good work with your performance. That's my opinion. That's how I feel about it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox or you'd like to watch Star Wars Neon Noir, check out the links in the description. We got Facebook. We got Instagram. We got my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to see something else on these daily videos, throw it in the comments. I'll throw it on the list. All right, everybody. You have a good one.